looking good there. All right, go ahead, go again.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So, yeah, we're presenting on utility management systems. Short acronym is UMS. So utility management systems is a really small company that is a sales representative for water pump manufacturers. I know it's super exciting, but y'all like to get really excited about it because it's important to us. Basically, they buy pumps from a manufacturer and sell them to people like schools or cities that kind of will get water where it needs to go. So it's in something like this called a pump station, which either takes water to a water treatment plant so you can drink it, or after you have wastewater, it gets rid of the water that you don't want. This is an example of a pump. It could maybe be relatively scaled to size on the board there, which is cool. This is Dave. He's the president and CEO, the lead engineer, cutest man on the planet, and my dad. He started UMS 35 or 40 years ago, and for 35 years, he and one employee, one business partner, sold water pumps and made the business run. Then a few years ago, that employee retired, so he hired another one, but he had a stroke, so he is a little slower around the office now, so he's had to hire a few more people to help him. So now the business structure is, again, pretty small, but we have my sister, Amber, a manager, Travis, a family friend, who's the estimator, and my mom, who does the accounting, her name is Shelly. But the reason why we took on this project is because since Dave had his stroke, a lot of the processes that were kind of convoluted but understood by him and his business partner were kind of brought out of how complicated they were. So in training new people, it's really, really confusing, and it takes a learning curve of 6 months. So those processes are something as simple as a file in a filing cabinet. They have a certain way that they want the files, and they have a certain way of writing down notes for things that is just really confusing, as well as, and because of that, the the filing structure and everything, a lot of the time the other employees will miss deadlines. Say an engineer will call and say, hey, I need this by Monday, but the documentation's not there, so they'll often miss that. And when I was working there a little bit, I had people threaten me with lawsuits and stuff like that because of just missed deadlines. So it's a really important thing that this kind of gets fixed. We have done the planning process of this was, we wanted to create a digital solution to bring all of the processes into one. And I will let Nathan talk about the feasibility of that process.
Okay. As part of the first stage of analyzing whether or not this would be even possible, I looked at the technical, the intangible benefits, the organizational feasibility, and economics of it. Technically, it's pretty simple, really. I mean, just a user interface, a basic database, a few other systems that can kind of help. Server. A few other things that could help with the process. So technically, very easy. Probably even we could do it at the end of this semester. And it would definitely contribute to their processes. It would help them get organized. It would help them train new people faster if they ever need to hire more people. Yeah, the economic analysis up here is a middle of the road economic analysis using numbers that aren't too conservative, aren't too hopeful. Even a middle of the line analysis shows them breaking even on the project within just over a year. And then, yeah, here are some of the more conservative and, of course, more optimistic estimates. This one has a higher interest rate, higher initial costs, higher operating costs. This one has a lower one. I used estimates provided by the company on how much they would save each year, and even these estimates are low. I just wanted to make sure that this was very much economically feasible for them. So they'll most likely save more than this.
So once we decided that it was something worth doing, obviously we have a project, so we had to do something. But for the company, it's worth doing as well. This is kind of the basic flow of how a pump is bought, and it all starts when a company needs a pump. So they're gonna send a request to UMS, and UMS is gonna process that request. There's a lot of back and forth that isn't necessarily detailed out in here between UMS and the company that needs it. But UMS then has to deal with the manufacturer. They need to find the right pump for the customer, and then they have to work with the manufacturer. In this case it's gonna be Flight, the pump manufacturer, and they've gotta work out the shipping and the different payments. This actually shows you better the back and forth between UMS and the customer representative. One of the issues that you'll see here is we have a filing cabinet, and every time something goes into the filing cabinet, it has to come back out. But the problem is that it's written on hand, it's small pieces of paper, it's calculations, and it's easy to lose. It's hard to find. It's not a database where you can just go type and say, I want this piece of data at this time. So we have, I think, a picture of the filing cabinet. Well, there's the filing cabinets, and so part of this job would also be that, these records, you need to sort through these records, right? You need to go and put them into the database. You need to be able to retrieve it. And so this is where a lot of the problems are coming from. But just to kind of show you into some of the lower level processes, they're fairly straightforward, but they can be broken down. And the new system is going to handle these processes and make them simpler and make them more up to date and hopefully make it all clear online. But here's the new system proposal that we'll talk about.
Yes, so in talking about a new system, we decided, just like what Nathan was talking about, we need a simple database to replace that filing cabinet. We're going to need a user interface. We're going to need a server to take care of all of that, all the running. And then two other things that we think would benefit the company are a reminder feature to kind of help them with their deadlines so that they're not missing those deadlines anymore. And then also links to frequented sites. So here you can see in our beautiful prototype, we have buttons here that would help them to get to the manufacturer's website or to the supplier's website, and it would just make their jobs easier. Next slide. Here you can see a little bit more of that. And this is from an actual project that they worked on with Brighton High School. I mean, the website isn't, but this is something that they would actually be able to use. Okay, so then, now this is gonna look a little familiar. You already saw our data flow diagram. But what we wanna point out is that now the filing cabinet has been replaced with a data store, which will be a database in this case. And let's go ahead and click over to the next one. So this is an example of how some of the lower level processes would be more automated and easier to work with. So in this case, it's just showing that there will be a calculator online, so Dave doesn't have to pull out his calculator and figure those values out. Let's go to the next one. In this sub-level, this one's talking about getting scraping the data from the manufacturer's website so that they don't have to go to the manufacturer every time they want to know what their current prices are. And so that would also make it quite a bit faster. We'll go to the next one. And then on this one, this also talks about a calculator that would be built in and just save the company some steps because we've already built these features in. And next slide. So then what you're looking at now is our entity relationship diagram of this is what we would build our database on. The most important thing to note here is that even a simple database is going to do great things for UMS because they won't have to go search through their filing cabinet anymore. And it'll save them a lot of time and free up processes to go out and get new bids and make more money expand. So let's go on to the next one. Okay, so then here is our Gantt chart. This is kind of an estimate of how the project will play out. We're estimating it will take 3 to 4 weeks. And then, so after looking at all of these features and building into the project, we are hoping that this will be really beneficial to UMS because we know that it's economically feasible, we know that these are something that we can help them with, and we know that they would really appreciate all this help, as long as we can get them to move over the new data systems. And so thank you everyone for listening to our project. We're super excited for UMS. Alright, our group is presenting on Abacus Solutions, and we're excited to be here with y'all today. I'm Whitney.
Michael.
I'm Savannah.
I'm Kent.
Sweet. So some background information on Abacus. It's a pretty cool company. It's headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. It's very much an IT company, and they have two, oh, actually this is cool. Their slogan is "We get it, we get IT." Very funny. They have two main functions. One is that they buy and sell used equipment and they refurbish it. The other one is they're starting to transition into cloud services and offerings and things like that. So just to get you familiar with some of the roles in their company that we're going to be working with. They have a sales floor. It's pretty much just a bunch of product specialists who are really great at working with customers, buying and selling. Another name for those is IT brokers. You might hear us use those interchangeably during the presentation. They also have what they term the Cisco Lab, which is a site, it's on site, and that's where their hardware technicians kind of fix the equipment and refurbish it. They've also got a warehouse with warehouse clerks that shelf and unshelf, and a shipping and receiving floor.
So talking about the business case, the problem that they're running into is that IT brokers are selling equipment to customers, and there's sort of a gap in communication between the technicians and the IT brokers. So sometimes equipment is not tested and the IT brokers sell it, and then before they ship it, they test it and find out it actually doesn't work. And that leads to lost sales, but more importantly, it leads to lost customer trust. We're going to go over the scope of the project and the feasibility of the project after we've discussed the system, so it'll have a little bit more context.
Sweet. So the current system, this is the process diagram. It's very complicated, so we're not going to bore you with it right now. So instead, I'm going to give you like a picture walkthrough. Here are the people, though. These are the swim lanes. So you've got the product specialist or IT broker, the selling company, shipping and receiving, hardware technician, warehouse clerk, the buying company, and they also have contractors that if something is too hard to fix, they'll send it off to a contractor. So the first step in this process is the purchase. So usually a company like this is going out of business, and so instead of just getting rid of all the servers and IT equipment they have, they'll call up an IT broker. They'll say, hey, we're having an auction. Why don't you come over here? Sometimes the details are very scant, though. It can be like, we've got a couple of pallets. How much are you willing to give us for them? So it's kind of like a guessing game for the IT brokers, but that's just part of the business. If the IT broker does complete the sale, like if they win the bid, obviously the company ships it to them, and the next step is the intake. So the equipment is unboxed in the shipping and receiving floor. Then there's some critical decisions made by the IT broker. So if it's valuable and new, so deemed like within 3 or 4 generations back, it gets tested immediately. And they use these red and green stickers to show if it passed or failed testing. And regardless of the outcome, it's then shelved. The next one is if it's valuable but it's not new, then they skip the testing phase and they just shelve it. Lastly, if it's not valuable or new, they call up a scrap company and get a few cents per dollar or per pound, and that's how they make money. Next is the request. So a buying company will contact the IT broker, say, hey, do you have this equipment? He'll check in the inventory system and see if they have it, and then he will call up the hardware technician. He'll say, hey, we wanna, someone's interested in buying this, they just put in the order today. Can you go out and get it? He then contacts the warehouse and they unshelf it for him. And he brings it back to the lab for testing. Now, regardless of if it was tested or not, they test it again. If it fails testing, then they call up the IT broker, who then calls the customer and says, hey, I know we just sold you this, but there's gonna be a huge delay. They don't tell them why, but it's because the equipment failed. If it does pass, then they load up with the configuration that they've asked for. They print out a copy of the testing report that shows that everything passed. They box it up, and it gets sent to the customer.
Okay, so just a few, there are just a few pain points of the current system right now. So the first is where this is, but this is where the decision is made where to test, or which products to test when they're ingested into the company. So there's no structured decision process to decide which products to test when they first come in. So that can lead to variability in the types of products that are tested and just any problems associated with that. The next problem is here with the physical stickers, the green and the red sticker. Having physical stickers and no notes in the database leads to IT brokers not knowing the status of the testing or whether that product has been tested. So when a potential customer calls a broker and he looks up in their database, he doesn't know if that product has been tested, and if it has, what's the status of that. The third problem is right here, where an item fails testing after being sold. So this obviously delays or even cancels the purchase, and it has negative side effects for the customer and potentially relationship problems with the customer and the company. The last problem is right here, where the IT broker manually tells the warehouse to test a certain item. So manually mean sending an email, calling them on the phone, or even going in person. So this leads to just extra time in the process, which can just bog down the entire process itself.
Okay, so now that we've explained the system, like this is an IT company. They like know what they're doing. They have like a good database and they have good processes right now. But they do run into this problem where they like are selling equipment and it hasn't been tested pretty frequently. And Kev will talk later about like kind of the sales that they're losing because of that. So we came up with a few things to try to help avoid this in the future. First thing is letting the right person decide when to test the equipment. So you saw at the beginning how before it was just IT broker was deciding like based on his like market knowledge. This is going to be something that the technician it would be in his swim lane. This decision tree is what we're calling it that you see on the screen. So based on a list that a technician or an IT broker or salesperson would put together on if a certain piece of equipment is currently being sold in the market, if it's active equipment, and if it's going to sell for a lot of money, a piece of equipment will be either tested immediately or they'll wait to test or they'll scrap it immediately. So a piece of equipment that's not being sold in the market and isn't going to provide a lot of value to the company is just going to be scrapped. But just the opposite will be tested immediately. Something that the technician will decide is whether you see that there's a box that says Cisco product. So Cisco for this company is a reliable brand. They know that they can trust it, so that if they get a Cisco product based on this decision structure, they can kind of wait to test, and if not, they'll test it immediately. So this kind of alleviates some of the stress of deciding when to test and it has like a structure, a set decision every single time. Something that we also thought was important is putting the information on deciding when to test in their database. This is just like a diagram of showing like the ingest of equipment. But the most important thing is just adding this equipment test status into the inventory database in this equipment entry. And here we just show the process of a salesperson alerting the technician that a piece of equipment needs to be tested immediately if it hasn't already been tested. So in this example, a salesperson would see in the database that a piece of equipment hasn't been tested and that their customer wants to buy that piece of equipment. So they tell the technician immediately that they need to test it. They CC them on the email, or they copy them on the email, so they don't have to go tell them themselves, but that they can alert them that testing can begin so that they can get the product out to them sooner, or just not delay finding any issues. So here is just an ERD of this new inventory database with a list of active equipment, or like equipment that's currently being sold in the market, a table of testing information, a main table of like inventory information for each product they have, and then just some information about an IT worker and a technician that would be related to the sale of this product. So currently there exists just the inventory table, so we're adding these extra tables.
So as far as the scope of this project, we need to create an active list, and that would require a team of experienced IT brokers and programmers to plan and implement the list. There would need to be a new test field in the database, so we just need to modify the current system, and that would require the database admin. We also need to come up with programs to train the employees on the new systems and practices. The feasibility, technically, this is not a difficult project. This is an IT company. This is the stuff that they do. They should be able to do it pretty easily. So it's low risk. Financially, it's low risk as well. The amount of revenue this company pushes, this is not a huge deal. We project that it should take about 5 business days to implement this and come up with the training programs. And we don't know the exact numbers behind this, but as far as our best estimate on what the salaries are, it would take about $16,000 of employee time. That does not account for opportunity cost for pulling employees onto this project. So bear that in mind. This is a little bit optimistic, but regardless, the metric holds. We're losing about $500 per day to these sales that don't go through because of untested equipment. And that's not a ton of money for this company, but it does add up. The more important thing is that we're losing customer trust. With these metrics, it would take about 32 business days to break even on the project, or about 6.5 business weeks. And after that, it's just financial benefits. The biggest hurdle, as far as feasibility, is going to be operational. The IT brokers receive commission for the sales that they do. So if they have equipment that hasn't been tested, they're sort of incentivized to push it out and complete the sale, as opposed to waiting to hear back if it's been tested or not. So there need to be some pretty strict regulations to keep them from doing that. And that is our presentation.
Questions for them?
What was that?
Oh, we have a little bit extra time. We're only gonna have 4 groups present today instead of 6. So we have a couple minutes in case people want to ask questions.
And how did you guys find the
So my brother is an IT broker. That's what he does, and ever since he started working at this company, he's kind of brought up this issue. So when we were signing this, I just called him up. And yeah, like we said, they push around a lot of revenue, so I'm kind of surprised they haven't explored this option yet.
Like a testing table is like pretty easy to just put in instead of like it seems silly just putting the stickers on it.
According to her brother, there's kind of a social issue with a couple of the people that are key in implementing this process. But yeah.
They just don't like their accounting.
Yeah.
How many people are at the company?
There's an organization chart, which we didn't have it here. I think it's less than, what would you guys say, 30?
I'd say about 50.
It's a pretty small company. I think there's about 6 or 7 IT brokers, and about the same number of shipping clerks, hardware technicians, all that.
That's actually interesting. If we do implement these new structured lists and stuff, then as the company grows and they pull people on, it'll be faster to train them, which is a side benefit. Anyone else? Thank you.
know, right? You don't take it off.
Alright, so my name is Sydney Allison,
I'm Tanner.
I'm Luke.
and we're presenting an analysis of APEC Engineering. APEC Engineering is a small company based in Cleveland, Ohio. They get leads from companies that are having engineering problems, and they create solutions. And a lot of times they have to create innovative solutions in which they've never done before. So if we go to the next slide, we can see a little bit of their organization. They are a small organization, and they have a very flat structure with the president at the top and then everybody else underneath. One of the things to note is that David is the president. That's who we have been working with and interviewing, and he plays a lot of different roles within the organization right now. They make $2 million in sales, and the reason they were interested in speaking with us is because they wanted a way to increase sales to $3 million. And so through this analysis, we're going to look at what we believe is a pain point and how we can fix it.
So probably one of their biggest issues right now is that they have sufficient capacity to grow and they have enough engineers, but they aren't able to turn around leads that they receive into quotes fast enough. Mostly because David is the only salesperson that they have, and so whenever somebody needs a new piece of equipment, a lot of times these are engineering solutions where they're somebody's machine broke in their factory, so they need to go create some way to make it faster and more efficient. And so right now he's the only person that turns these leads into quotes. As we were doing some feasibility analysis on all of the different things, they have some medium risk for technical and financial, but the biggest risk is operational. And it's pretty high risk because they've hired 2 salespeople in the past, over the past 5 years or so, and neither of them have panned out very well. We believe because of some issues that they have in assigning roles to the salesperson, but there's just a high risk in bringing on a new employee, especially in a company that only has 15 people in it overall.
The overview for the current sales process involves three actors, and 2 of those actors are external, or the vendor and the customer. The only person or role within the company is the salesperson, which, like Luke said, there isn't one right now. It's just they all do sales. Most of the time it's done by David, the president right now. And the key decision points are can we quote the project? What kind of quote would it be? What would our solution look like? And how should we propose our solution? So if you go to the next slide, you can see the current process all mapped out, and you can see that just the salesperson is doing so much compared to the external actors, and also just within the company, it's all one person.
So as we looked at our current system or their current system and what they use to kind of change their quotes into customers, so one of the biggest problems is that there's no prioritization of creating quotes. So basically what happens is let's say all 4 of us are hey, we have a great customer for you. We give them to David. He has no way of saying okay, who should I call first or what should I do? Even if we give him in the next day, what he does is just whoever calls him and bugs him the most, hey, have you done this quote? Those are the people that get their quotes first. And so as you can see in this level 1 diagram, these are the steps that they need to take, but there's no organization to it right now. So another problem that they have is that creating the quotes is really lengthy and subjective, and it's really lengthy because you can see there's so much back and forth between the sales system and the customer right now that they are the ones it just goes back and forth so much that it slows it down so much. And then also when they're creating quotes, they don't really have a specific process of what you should do step by step. It's just basically they said, David is just kind of random guessing and using his knowledge to create and estimate quotes. So another problem that we found is they mentioned there's a lack of a structured salesperson role. So everyone's just kind of doing a little bit of everything, and like they said, they had 2 salespeople fail in the past just because there's not really a defined role and responsibilities and tools for that person to use. And then the fourth problem is that there's a lot of loops in the sales process. Like you can see in the diagram, there's a lot of back and forth. A lot of those are just like loops, and sometimes they just don't end, and it makes it like it takes so much longer to create quotes.
So to increase sales for APEC, we came up with several solutions. And the first is new roles. So they have to have a salesperson. That was our first suggestion. They need to bring back a salesperson who's competent, can do the job well. Our plan to help with that is to encourage them to implement activity flows, templates, and walkthroughs so that the salesperson can just jump right into the job and be successful. We're also going to be reducing the scope of the salesperson through the creation of another role, which would be the solutions designer. The solutions designer would be in charge of just proposal quotes. Right now, proposal quotes take the most time because they have to go into Visio, design a solution, figure out how much that solution would cost, make sure it's the cheapest and best option, and then present that to the customer. So we think if we just pull that, all those tasks into a different role, that the whole sales process will go more smoothly. Right now we think that David, the president, should be in charge of that because that's kind of his passion. And it's also a good idea for him to do it, or somebody within the company to start out or launch that role, just because it does require a lot of skill. And that would just be an example of the qualifications that maybe an outside hire would need to have.
One of our other like big recommendations for them is to introduce like a customer relationship management program, which they call CRMs. The one that we found is called Capsule. And one of the advantages of Capsule is that it's actually free for up to 250 clients if you only have 2 users. And with how small of a company that APEC is, they could easily like start off with the free version, and then even if they decide that they really liked it and moved into it, it's only $15 per user per month. So it'd be a total cost of about $4,000 to $6,000 a year to implement this system. And some of the things that would be really good about doing this is that they would be able to centralize all their client information into one place. One of the things that they have a hard time with right now is like qualifying their quotes. And so if they have clients that have like purchased from them before, they'd be able to see all their organized data and know that they can do more deals with these people. It'll also make it a lot easier for like a new salesperson to come into the company, because if all of the data is already there organized, it's right now all their information is kind of like spread out on different like spreadsheets, just kind of all over the place. And so for a salesperson like come in and like have to be able to do all the things that like the President David expects the new salesperson to do, they like don't really have the tools to be able to do that. One of the other benefits of having like a CRM is that it has like a pipeline for active projects. So whenever you get like a new lead or like create a quote for that lead, you can track it all within the program, and it's visible for all the users within the company without having to like jump between a bunch of different spreadsheets. We thought a little bit about like what it would take to like make something like this, but honestly the commercial off-the-shelf products are pretty great, and honestly at the price it's a lot easier solution for them.
Our next solution is about their quote log. This is a screenshot, except for this blue column, of the quote log that they already use right now. We know that it's going to take a good amount of time for them to put all of their data into the customer relationship manager. And so our solution until then is for them to use their quote log, but to have the new salesperson that they hired be in charge of the quote log. In this quote log, it is not filled out completely. Once you go down to years that are close, like more current years, almost none of the information is filled out. So we think giving that to the new person that they hire is going to be a way for them to fill in the entire thing. And then also adding an extra column for actual cost so that they can more fully see their margins, so that they can see which quotes are giving them the most revenue, so that they can continue to increase their sales each year and see the overall picture of their company. The next solution that we are giving to APEC is the lead score, which is an Excel sheet that we created where it has evaluation statements where it evaluates the reliability of a lead that they receive. So what will happen is they'll receive a lead from their vendor. They'll go in here, they'll ask these questions. For example, this is a returning customer. If it's true, they'll put true, and then the company themselves is going to weight the importance of each statement so that they can have responsibility of what they think is most important to create the most profitable leads and quotes. And then they'll store this in the other tab and be able to filter it by either score or date or however they're wanting to do it. And that it will give them a process to prioritize the quotes instead of just doing whichever person or whichever company is calling them more often.
So this is like our new activity diagram for the current sales process. So as you can see, like the salesperson has a lot less responsibility, and there's less back and forth between the customer and the salesperson and the designer. So thank you.
Do you have any questions for us?
How did you guys
So I actually was we were originally working with a company called Stretch Tape in Cleveland, so I'm from Cleveland, and one of my dad's fraternity brothers owns the company called Stretch Tape, and they actually do a lot of business with APEC Engineering, so he gave me the contact information for the president, David, and we talked, and they were kind of reviewing some of their issues right now with all their sales issues, and so that was a great project.
Is there issue with sales, they just don't have enough leads, or they're not prioritizing the leads, like they can't handle everything that's coming in?
They can't handle everything that's coming in, so they're getting plenty of leads, and they have the ability to like do it, like they're not at their capacity of like being able to work. They're just this process of like from leads to project is just a giant mess, and so they can't turn them over fast enough to get like the projects out.
Like what grading scale or what code, like is there a code for them to decide what project's important with your Excel sheet?
Yeah, so if they choose true, then it gives it a 1. If it's false, it's a 0. And then they put the weight 1 to 3 of how important the statement is. And then it'll calculate a score. And then depending on the bandwidth, they'll probably choose at which level. So maybe a 5 or a 6 or 7, they're like, we can do anything above a 7 because we have enough. But if it's like kind of a slow season, anything above a 5, we have more time, we can quote those leads.
Yeah, the biggest thing with that is being able to prioritize it above, like what Austin was saying, where like mostly they just like go off of like, if like a customer keeps bugging them, like they want a solution, then that's the one that they do. And so getting more profitable and better opportunities.
CRM should help with that later.
Are they actually looking at implementing those changes that you guys?
So we haven't presented our changes yet to them because we've been working on it for the past week, but hopefully.
Yes, they were very open to changing the process. Like even when we were meeting with them, they were like, yeah, we know it's probably not the best practice to just do whoever is calling us most. And so they wanted a solution, they just didn't really know what to do, and they're so busy that they almost don't have time to like think of and like plan all of it. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm Allie, this is Nate, Kyle, and Rowan, and we did our presentation on Lehigh Rolling Mills. So, a little bit of background, Lehigh Rolling Mills has been around for 100 years, over 100 years actually. It's a flour mill, and at their headquarters in Lehigh, it consists of the mill itself, and then their offices, as well as a retail store. They currently sell their flour and some baking mixes that are made from their flour, and a couple of other products which are sold at their retail store and then at a few associated food stores in Utah, as well as a couple of bordering states. And right now, well, I guess a few years ago, they were bought out by a company called KEB Enterprises, and they're working on expanding to sell all of their products nationwide. So as they've been around for over 100 years, they have, updated their systems and processes several times, but there are definitely still some things that need some work. And we decided to focus on their scheduling system. So they have quite a few part-time employees, and currently their scheduling system is very simple. It's all paper-based, and it's really complicated to keep track of everything. And so kind of our goal with this project is to create a website or an application to help them be able to better do their scheduling.
Awesome. So this is our scope, you can read it. Basically, we want to improve the scheduling system so that it will process time off requests, time switching requests, or switch shifts requests. That'll be simple to use for the employees, easy, and very accessible for the employees. There are 3 deliverables we thought that were very important. One is the design, which we've been working on, this is a part of it. And another would be the full program on the web. And the last one would be just kind of a guide, how to use it, and the overall kind of summary. As a small company, they have quite a few restraints. For starters, they don't have a lot of technology resources. They have a website, very simple, but they don't have servers. They don't have a lot of hardware at all. Their budget is kind of tight. KEB bought them out, so obviously they're not making a lot of money, and so they don't have a lot of personnel also working for them.
So this is our diagram of the current system. This is the very simple version. So basically, the employees are given which days need to be worked, and then they submit a days off request, and then they, in return, are given the final schedule. I'm going to go to the next one. This is the more complex version of that, just broken down into more processes. And then if you go to the next one, this is the activity diagram, which is kind of what I wanted to focus on. So essentially what happens is the manager each month prints off a hard copy calendar for every single employee, hands it to them. The employee writes their name on the days that they need off, gives it back to the manager. The manager collects all of the calendars, looks at each of them, figures out who needs which days off, creates the schedule, and then sends it out to the employees. And this obviously creates a lot of issues. So the first thing is the approval processes. Since they're all just submitting their calendars at the same time, the manager feels like she has to give time off to everyone that asks for it. And she ends up working shifts that she shouldn't have to work because everybody else has asked for it off. And obviously, having it paper-based is not very efficient, and it could be automated easily. And then third, the communication between managers and employees is lacking. Like when they have to switch shifts, they're supposed to contact the manager, but a lot of times that doesn't happen, and then people don't show up for shifts, and people don't know who's responsible.
So to make things easier for everybody, we've developed a new system that will help employees to switch shifts with each other and submit and get time off without anybody really having to look at it besides the system. The system would automatically do it. It would be like a website or an application. We've kind of developed a website that we'll show you some mock-ups for in just a couple minutes. So basically the website would just automatically, employees would go to it, submit their time off requests or shift swap requests, and it would automatically check to make sure that they're available to take that time off, make sure that enough employees are scheduled for each shift, and make sure that all of the shifts and the employees that are working, it all adheres to company policies. For example, there's one employee that has to work with the manager present, and so it would just check for everything to make sure everything was sound and good. And this is a data flow diagram of the new system. So you can see the employee would first submit their availability information and time off requests for the next month to the system, and the system would process those time off requests, their employee schedule, as well as the company policies, and just make sure everything matches, and then it'll generate a new shift schedule for the next month based off of everybody's availability information and time off requests. And then that shift schedule will be uploaded to the website, and then email version of that, or a notification will be sent out via email to all of the employees, letting them know that the website had that schedule available. And the email could also include the schedule itself.
Cool, so we kind of made a simple mock-up just of our program actually. And so we have a lot of high school part-time employees, so we wanted the program to be very simple, very easy to use. So we come in, they put in their username, their password, they log in. This is our homepage. There's only 3 buttons because we want them just to be simple. And so they'll click on the calendar to check all their shifts, see when everyone else is working, and they'll go through it and they say, okay, maybe I want to submit a time off request. So let's say, I want, I don't know, Saturday the 16th off in November. So they'll click on the 16th. And it'll say, as I said, it's either, a lot of them are part-time employees, and so they can select if they want half of the day off or the full day if they can work, whatever. And they put the reason in for the request, which is very crucial, just in case it shouldn't be approved. They'll submit that, and it'll say if it's approved or not approved. And then another feature we added was for switching shifts, and so basically the program just prompts and tells them to click on the shifts that they want. So let's say want to switch a shift with Tom. So we'll click on Tom, and it shows your shift, Tom's shift, and then you have to again put the reason why you're switching the shift, and then you submit it, and it approves it or disapproves it. And so that's just kind of our simple mock-up of what the program would look like, and it would be, like we said, a website type program, just so that anyone could access it anywhere and be able to check their schedule at all times, and not just have to funnel through or looking for text or whatever.
So we expect the implementation of the new system to take about 3.5 weeks. So we've already developed the design for the system. We expect the company already has like a software engineer that works for them. So we expect it to take him about 2 weeks to build it, and then about 3 days to test it, and then a week to install it. So that includes fixing any bugs, as well as uploading it onto like a server, deploying it. So it'll be about 3.5 weeks total.
Awesome. So we suggested to the company that they develop it in-house with their engineer named Alex. He's a really good guy. He's smart. He already developed point of sale operations. So he knows how the system works. He knows how the company websites already work. And so he's very familiar with the technology of the company. So they however don't have a lot of resources. So we suggest that they use a third-party provider, such as AWS, to support their server or their website. So as not having the hardware in store, they're subject to vulnerabilities that are out of their control. So we put the risk as medium-low, but overall we put it as low risk because the project is also very small, and you don't always need the calendar up. It's nice to always have it up, but so organization, we also thought it would be low risk. Since it's built in-house, there's no need to do maintenance and hardware because the server will be out of house, just the code will be built in-house. Building it in-house will provide flexibility as it's a growing company. They can expand it to include different locations and different features as time goes on. And it was actually requested by the manager, a system like this, so they're very on board with it. So we thought the organizational risk was low. Economically, this is very simple overview. The income is from the time saved per year. So the manager makes about $21 an hour. We'd say about 2 to 3 hours a month she works on the calendar. So about $504 a year they'd save. They would pay the development for 2 weeks. It's about $1,700 of Alex's time. And maintenance is very low. And so the total profit would only be about $54. It's not a lot, but the project isn't necessarily to bring in revenue. It's more for the intangible benefits. So the intangible benefits, it's easier to schedule for everyone, easier for the manager, more convenient for employees to find their shift. They don't have to text the manager if they accidentally lose the image of their text of the schedule. They have to just have to go online, log in, and look at it. It's more convenient. for employees to request shifts off. It puts more responsibility on them too, to make sure that they're at their shift if they shift request, or if they switch shifts. And it's scalable, so that they can use this in other places. So those are the main benefits. These are the reasons why we think that they should develop it. And if we have any questions?
With like requesting change schedule or shift schedule with somebody else, when you select to switch to somebody else, is it like a notification sent to the other person, or is it just assumed that they've already kind of discussed amongst each other, like, hey, let's switch shifts? Or
No, it would definitely let the other person know.
It would be worked
Yeah.
into the system a little bit deeper than that mock-up showed,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
but like, cause they would have to both accept it and the manager would
okay,
have to approve
so
it.
let's say someone wants to switch shifts with me, I would have to go manually accept it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that it's more automated.
That way you can't just switch with anyone you want.
No, 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 I just didn't
Steal their shift.
I just didn't know if that was like okay, cool.
So kind of like a similar question, whenever you request for a shift off, does it just automatically do it? Is it like a first come, first served basis, or is it like the manager has to approve it?
It would be a first come, first served basis, so the system would just check if anybody else had already asked for that time off, and the system would know how many people need to work that day already. And so they would automatically approve it, that way the manager doesn't have to deal with it as much.
We were thinking of having like when people submit like their shift availability for the next month, they like will like rank like what shifts they want off in order of like how bad they want it off, and then it would like kind of like look at everyone's like first priority, kind of just like figure out the best way to get people's like most wanted shifts off, if that makes sense.
Do you think there's any other processes in the system, maybe like their timesheet or payment schedule that you could also integrate into this application that would be just specified in the calendar system?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of systems like that, for example, would have like a tab where they could view their paycheck or things like that. So I think there's definitely a lot of other things we could implement into the system if they wanted to.
How did you guys get in contact with them?
My mom works there.
And related to that, it was implied that they weren't doing well. Is that true, or were
No, they're doing okay. A few years ago they weren't doing that well, and then they got bought out. But they've done a lot since then to improve. And so, yeah, like I said, they're working on expanding right now to like sell their products across the nation. And I mean, you've probably seen a lot of their products in grocery stores. So.
Yeah, I know. I'm a long time fan.
Yeah.
Their little bug mixes and stuff.
They're good.
So do they? In addition to that, do they have like regular flour?
Yeah.
And if so, like where do they get it and where do they sell it?
Yeah, so they've like prided themselves over the years in making good relationships with local farmers. So all their wheat comes from local farmers and is just like delivered on trucks, and then they mill it actually there in Lehigh at their headquarters and then sell it. They sell it in Costco as well, so you can find it there. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering how, when the schedule is generated, is it like you would prioritize, so let's say that there only needed to be 3 employees working on Tuesday, but you had 6 people try to work on Tuesday, then would it prioritize between the 6 and say, okay, we'll give you 3 Tuesday and then you 3 have to take somewhere else, or?
So it wouldn't like take people requesting to work on a certain day, it just takes requests off. And then it would say, okay, so now we have these people to work with that can work on this day. Let's assign these 3 people for this day. And then based on that, for the next day, it would say, okay, those people are already working the day before, so let's assign the other 3 people this day. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Okay.
I'll just play devil's advocate just a little bit. So, did you consider whether there are any products on the market that might meet their need? The reason I ask that is, you know, sometimes people are always default to I'm going to build this, but then if you think about the type of problem it is, sometimes you can think, oh, logically there's got to be a product out there on the market for that. And as you answer that, there's something I like about what you did, but I just want to first ask, did you think about, does anybody else in this world schedule employees, and therefore there's some commercial software out there that we could buy?
Yeah, I think We definitely considered that. One of the reasons that we went with what we did is because it's very similar to the process that they do on paper, but just moving it to a website, so they wouldn't have to like change so much, and it would be really easy for them to use.
It's also very scalable for that specific company so that they can change it as they grow and as they change things around, so they don't have to necessarily be restricted by these other products on the market.
As I asked that, I'm reminded of when I completed some software at some company, and then some director from a billion-dollar firm was now my manager, and he's giving me the business essentially, going, like, really, you don't think anybody else out there has come up with this before, and you couldn't have bought it? It's like, now we have to maintain this forever and have developers maintaining this. So I actually like the simplicity of the application that you put together for them, but that is something that'll come up when you propose stuff. It's like, wait a minute, like, every restaurant on planet Earth, for example, has a scheduling issue, so
Yeah.
did you consider this? Anyway, good job, guys. That's it for today. We don't have any more.